Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 12th Annual Naples International Film Festival and this special Talkback Q&A. I'm Shannon Franklin, festival producer. We want to thank our sponsors for the Talkback Q&A, Saran and Stan Kraushar. Today, we are so excited to be talking about the narrative feature, 7 short films about our marriage. And it is my pleasure to introduce the writer, producer, and director of the film, Chris Hansen. How you doing, Chris?
Good, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. And where are you zooming in from?
I am in my office at Baylor University in Waco, Texas.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. I love your office. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there.
Thank you. Yes. I always, with Room Rater and backgrounds, I'm always very conscious of what's in the background. So I'm like, what should I move out? What should I leave in?
No, it gives us a snapshot of your personality. I have a more curated, quieter background, but this is great. So thank you. This is the upside of doing these kind of special virtual Q&As. So listen, we are so excited to have your film as part of our festival, and we're so grateful to take the time now to do this Q&A with us. As the writer and the director of the project, I always love to start out asking, how did this project come to you? How did the idea come to you?
Sure.
Why tell this story? And give us a little background, please.
Well, I write about and I make movies about things that are relevant to me personally, I think. Probably true of every filmmaker, but I've been married for more than 27 years, and we've had our ups and downs and difficult times, and I've always wanted to tell a story about that. And then it was a friend of mine had posted something on social media about reaching a milestone anniversary and having done it through a lot of raw, real life junk. That was the phrase that he used, and that stuck with me because I was like, yeah, that's what marriage really is sticking with each other through all the excuse me, all of the raw real life junk that happens, and how do you deal with it. And so really thinking about a story about, not about, I've done a story about infidelity, not about big things like that necessarily, but all the small things that add up, that if you don't deal with them well, things like, not having enough money especially when you're younger and just married, or, dealing with, as they do in the film, dealing with infertility and how that can really nag at you. I just felt like it was really an interesting thing to tell the story specifically of those little things and how couples deal with them.
That's so fantastic. And so, 7 short films about our marriage. Why not, 6? Why not 8? Like, how did you, land on that title, but ultimately land on, obviously, that story structure?
It initially was 6. I started out with the idea of, I think I felt like I needed 6 to tell the story, to really get at the root of, all the things that they would experience. So I started out by just in my notes creating a bulleted list of 6, literally just 6 events that might be the things that they deal with. Sorry, I feel like I have a frog in my throat. I apologize for.
You can have a sip of water,
Yeah,
be relaxed. It's good. We're pretty casual here.
So I started out with, like, I have this bulleted list, and let me say, what are the things that they deal with? And the first, one is on their wedding day and dealing with a parent who's clearly not on board with the wedding. The second one was, and yeah, I was drawing, not in that one in particular, but on other things, like the second one, when they're dealing with money issues and who gets to pursue their dream first. I'm drawing on things that happened in my marriage. I try to paint the guy as the one who's wrong a lot of the time, because I look at myself and see my own immaturity.
Because you've been married for 27 years and you figured out how to stay married for 27 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, I made it through those really dumb things that I did. I haven't learned all the dumb things yet, but I know some of the pitfalls. And so I was structuring around, like, what are the events that are either things I've experienced or things I know, when they deal with the death of a parent, that will eventually happen. Neither of us has dealt with that yet. And how do they affect you? So I structured it around a number of events, and then at some point I felt like there was too much of a gap between, or too much of I shouldn't say a gap, but too much of a jump from whatever the 5th one was to the 6th one. And the 6th one at that point was what is now the 7th. And I felt like we needed something in the middle to kind of deal with that. So I added a 7th.
Makes sense. Mentioning your wife, because you said, you know, you're drawing on aspects of your own life, but clearly this is still a fictional story. What was her take on, you know, your take on marriage? I'm curious.
I think first time she read it, there were things that now are no longer in the movie that hit a little too close to home. I think just because things that I look at as distant and not a big deal. You know, we're writers and we write about ourselves, and we don't think too much about that, but the families around us don't necessarily want all of their stuff on the screen. And it wasn't anything, you know, that significant, but it did make me kind of step back and say, okay, that doesn't need to be in there. These little elements that are that are unique to my story could easily be something else fictional. So, you know, I changed those to other things. They weren't any major things. And, you know, when I say I'm drawing from my own life and my own marriage, it's really, you know, the first half of the story is drawing from things we experienced, not like the racism angle. Obviously, I didn't experience that. And I have a great father-in-law. So, but other, you know, problems we experienced. But then the second half is really drawing on, you know, the inevitable consequences of them not dealing with things well, which was really, you know, like I said, we've had our problems, but we've never had that kind of thing happen.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much in the story that is so relatable. And I think, again, you touch upon so many key things that long-term relationships go through, you know, regardless of your background or what's going on. There's just that universal theme that kind of happens. You did mention that, so I hadn't asked that yet, but in terms of it, the storytelling around an interracial couple and the things that show up around that, what was the choice then? You said this is not drawing from your own experience. And
so we're not an interracial couple. I don't have experience of interracial relationships, but you know, I wanted to, part of that was really just wanting to distance the film being read as too much about me, you know. So I wanted to make, I mean, obviously Noah's a filmmaker, or he wants to be a filmmaker. You know, he went to film school, he gets married right out of college. I mean, it was like, this is me. And so, and there were a couple of things I did to change that. And one of them was to make him African-American. And when I did, that opened up a whole dimension of story that I hadn't considered before. And so I started writing it thinking it would be a lot about race. And then it didn't turn out that way. So I, you know, and I was concerned, is it, you know, is that too much or too little? So I had a number of people read it to see. And, you know, one of the people who read it said, no, it's you don't have to mention it. The fact that Noah is in that advertising meeting and literally every face around him is white, it says a lot in and of itself. And so we leaned into those kinds of things, and including talking with Drez, the actor, when we were preparing the film. And I asked him about certain elements like that. And he said, I think this really stuck with me. He said, part of my identity is being a black man, but that's not all of my identity. And so he said, I would have been upset if you had made it all about race, because that's not the only thing that impacts my life and my relationships. It does impact it. So it's good that it's a part of the story, but it shouldn't be the whole story. And so, you know, I'm not a person of color, so I have to take I have to listen to people like that and try to tell the story the best way I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, so you've led into, I wanted to ask about casting. I mean, in any film, that's super important, but I mean, this piece really relies on two actors that can tell this story, that can connect. Can you talk about how you found these fantastic leads?
Yeah, and boy, they are great.
They're fantastic. They're so good.
Blessed that we had them. Yeah, it was an agonizing process for me. So we put it up on Backstage, the online casting program website. And so there were three roles we put up there were Noah and Madison, and then her father, because that was another significant part that I didn't have somebody clearly in mind for. And first of all, middle-aged white men, you'll get the phone book on Backstage. There are a lot of actors who are middle-aged white men. So that was hard to find somebody. We did find some, the actor we found, Sean, we did find through Backstage, and he was great. The other two, I looked at a lot of actors from Backstage, and there were some that were really good, but they weren't quite right for some reason or another. So as things happen like this all the time, both of those actors were recommendations from other directors I know. So China Walker, who plays Madison, had been in a film made by a colleague of mine here at Baylor. And, it was a comedy, and it was really, she had great comedic timing in it, but he said, look, you just got to watch her scenes. You can see that she can act. And he was right. My concern with her was, could she adequately portray the aging process? Because she looks rather young without any makeup.
Right.
I mean, she's like, I think she was 25 when we shot the film, but she could have easily played a 16-year-old on a Nickelodeon show,
right.
If asked to. She's just a very young looking actress, which can come in very handy, but wasn't handy for us. So with her, we had already hired a makeup artist, and that makeup artist did makeup tests with her to show aging. And the way we went with her for aging was, aside from changing the hair length, was that the makeup artist said, look, as women get older, they tend to wear more makeup. So one of our strategies will be a very natural look when she's younger, and then more makeup as she gets older. And that worked very well. And Drez was a recommendation from a director friend of mine in North Carolina. Drez was based in North Carolina at the time. And, he did a reading of the scene that we did we did this all via video, of course, because at the time China was in California and Drez was in North Carolina. I'm in Texas, and I didn't have money to fly people out for auditions. So he did a video audition that he sent me, and it was really good. And my big concern then was, will they work together? So we did a Skype call. This was before Zoom.
You were so ahead of your time.
Yeah, we did a 3-way Skype call where I had the two of them side by side on my screen, and they read the scene together. It was actually the scene where they hold hands through the window at the beginning. So they did that scene together, and we call this like a chemistry audition, that they work together. And I was really concerned that I'd be able to tell, because it's on video, they're not even in the same room. It was so good. They were so good in that scene. I actually, I had a tear in my eye watching them do this on video. And I mean, I'm that kind of person anyway, but they were just really good. So we're very fortunate. Like you said, it's a two-hander all the way. I mean, it's just the two of them almost all the time. And so you had to have people who could do this. And I just thought especially the scenes where the ones that I really love what they do is when I would just stay on one person's face for, a whole scene where she's called him and he's in the parking garage, and he's got to do a lot with his face, and he just does it, and she does it too at the end.
Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting that for such an important type of performance that you're looking for these type, this type of storytelling, that they didn't actually get to be in the same room until, you're in it. It worked out. And I mean,
Yes.
There's so many beautiful moments, so much intimacy and closeness, and all the nuances of relationship building. Right. And I think that they capture that so beautifully. How long did you have to shoot? What was that like once you had the actors together for the two of them to bond? And clearly they had it even, miles apart, but, tell us a little bit about that process on the ground with filming. And
we shot over a 4-week period in June of 2018. Probably there were 24 shooting days within that 4-week period. I can't remember exactly, but it's in that neighborhood. And we brought them in a few days before shooting started, so we could do not really a table read, but more of a, we kind of were, I have a seating area in my office, and we just kind of sat in the comfortable chairs and read through it together. And, I got to hear what they thought the characters were thinking. We talk a lot about that. With actors, I like to read it and just talk about where they're at, why they have questions, but sometimes I want to hear what their thoughts are and what the characters are thinking, and why, one of the things I've learned with actors is they're collaborators, not, I love Alfred Hitchcock, but the way he thinks of actors is
Right.
toys to mold and play. I think of them as collaborators. So I really love to hear what they think of the characters, because they bring new dimension, because they have to bring them to life. They have to make them into living, breathing people. And so they can bring such dimension to them that I may not have thought of. And then also, if there's something where I think they're off base, we can kind of, move in the right direction. So and that's a bonding thing too, just sitting and talking about the story and getting to know each other. And then, I took them out to dinner. I think, Drez reminded me of this in a Q&A recently. I didn't even remember it, but we all went out to dinner with my family. I'm married and I have 4 daughters. So it's a big, when I say with my family, it's a big endeavor. So because I like to create a family environment where people feel comfortable and know me and know my wife. And I guess it's the Francis Ford Coppola school of filmmaking, where it's kind of my family's not all involved in it, but all my kids end up in my movies usually. So,
Cool.
and my wife is one of the moms in the dance studio who gets alarmed when he raises his voice. That was my wife.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So they all end up as a part of it, because it's a big part of my life. So, yeah, I like to get them in and make them. I don't like with actors like the leads in this film. I want to have potentially a professional relationship and a friendship with them beyond the film, because I've worked with a number of actors that I bring back for future films, because we not only do we work well together, but they're friends, and I like working with people I have a comfort with.
I love that. I mean, you really sound like an actor's director.
I am, yeah.
I mean, which is a dream. And as I listen to you describe the environment, what a gift to the actors. And I think more now, I certainly can see how that shows up on the screen.
That's great.
And the type of direction that each vignette, shall we say, would need.
Yeah.
So since you're also the writer of the project, and now that you've kind of clued us in, I'm always curious, how close do you like to keep to your script, to your dialogue? How flexible are you as the actors make it their own to improvise? Yeah. I'm curious.
I like to stick pretty close, but I wouldn't use the word improvise, but I do think, like, my dialogue coming out of Drez's mouth, it's gonna change. It's not gonna be like where I might write in complete sentences, he's gonna talk like a person talks.
Right.
And that was one of the viewed that as a real positive when we auditioned Drez and we had the video of him doing the scene. One of the other producers said essentially that to me. It's like, him saying the words gives it a reality that just being on paper is not enough. And so, sorry, I got halfway into that answer and I forgot what the question was.
Yeah, we were just talking about how closely you like to stay to the script, how much flexibility you like to give to the actors. I think you were on the right path. You were there.
Sorry. Yeah, well, there are certain things that are, I think that what it comes down to is there are certain things that are written with a rhythm that's almost like a poetry. So like her final speech, there's a poetry to her saying, I wish, but that's not true. However she phrases it, that I wouldn't want anybody to change. And in fact, China told me at some point that speech was one of the big reasons she took the part, because she loved that speech. And there are things like that are really carefully written, like when she's telling her about her decision not to move, and he's in the parking garage, and it's long, this building, not an argument really, but this back and forth between them, that the way they interrupt each other or the things that they say are really important. And there are other places where you can see that, we can play around with it. We changed some of the lines, like when the groomsmen are ribbing him, because the way the guys are saying it, it's like, this actor saying that doesn't quite work, so let's change that.
Right.
So that's I have flexibility on some things and not on others. It just really depends.
No, and that makes sense. There are things that are very intentional, and if you don't hit them the right way, they don't land the way you intend. And there's other places, as you're saying, there's breathing room that makes sense to. No, I think, again, sounds like a really fantastic working environment for your.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, I think at the end of the day, the product you get. You know, a lot of times
Yeah.
you can really see, especially when you get the behind the scenes on it, how you got such a fantastic
Yeah.
end product of that. So do you have, I guess, what was the easiest, for lack of a better word, of the scene, you know, of the 7 for you to shoot, and what was the
Okay.
most difficult, the one that you maybe had the most, you know, for whatever the definition of difficult means for you, as I say
Right.
that.
Okay. So 1, the father; 2, the 3. I'm trying to think through all of them.
I mean, it doesn't, I mean, you know, no pressure.
No. I'm not. I don't feel pressure. I think that the none of them were easy per se. Nothing ever is in production, but I think that the sequence where she loses her father, that whole part. I don't know. I think from a production standpoint, there wasn't as much to do. Like, we had a limited number of shots that we needed in the funeral home. We had a limited number of shots in her. I mean, from a location standpoint, we were just in her bedroom
Right.
after that. And even that was a bit of a production challenge because you're in one, like, it's not a studio set where we have a lot of room. It was an actual person's bedroom. And so it's hard to move around. But there was not a lot of movement, so it makes things a little bit easier. And they just had a good rapport by then that the scene just was so good. I think the hardest one I probably would say is the reunion scene, because when you're doing a scene like that, well, it was a long scene. In fact, it's much longer in the first cut. We cut a lot out of it because that's one of those areas where I had a lot of extraneous details that are very, related to the way my wife and I got together. And so all of those details were hard for me to let go of because they felt important, even though they ultimately weren't necessary. So I think that final cut of that scene is about 13 minutes, the whole section. And the first cut was over 21 minutes. So we cut a lot out of it. And that scene was also, nighttime around here in the summer. It doesn't get really dark until 10. So you have from about 10 till 5:30 a.m. So we had to shoot overnights, and it was the first 4 nights of the shoot. So we immediately transitioned from day to overnights on the first day. And we had extras that so we had to have this reunion where we have what looks like a fairly large number of people at a reception or garden party, whatever you call it. And for the first 3 nights, we hired a few people to stay all night, and we carefully positioned them at different places at different shots, and used students as well. And then on one night, we asked as many of our friends and family who would come from 8 to midnight. We'd serve them dinner. They get to sit at the tables where, and just be part of the background. And the only times they had to really, when we were doing shots, they had to be quiet. But other than that, most of the time they could just sit and have a nice night. So that was how we managed it. But that was 4 nights of overnight shooting with extras, and then 1 night trying to manage this big scene.
Yeah, I mean, very indie filmmaking as well.
Yes.
So you answered the question, which rarely does this happen. Of course, you didn't shoot it in sequence. You shot it as you needed to for the production.
The sequence was really dictated in our situation by, I like to joke and say, the sequence was dictated by Drez's facial hair.
Right, that makes sense.
Because we wanted to start. We wanted him we had to use his facial hair to differentiate his look. And so we decided to start with a full beard.
There you go.
And from there, you can only go backwards.
So
we decided, well, which point is he going to have a full beard? And it's, part 4 and 5, I think we decided. So we had to shoot those first. And then once the beard went, we couldn't go back to those. So we had to build it around that.
That's really interesting that becomes the defining moment of how you're going to shoot. I don't think I've heard that before. That's,
I know.
So, but it worked out. Okay. So where do you think the characters are after the movie? After cut, after the end?
I like to think Okay, and did you watch the little? Did you see the little post credits
I
moment?
I did, and so everyone here has seen the film, so hopefully they all made it to the end, and if not, they can still go back right now and look
It was
after.
funny. One festival, and they're friends, so it wasn't a big deal. But the festival director, they're two festival directors. One of them had not. He said, when I get to the credits of a feature, I just turn it. I'm done. And there was just this little third. It's not even. I think it's 10 seconds, and then
Yeah.
that little scene comes up. So
Do we tell the audience in case they missed it? Do we just say
sure,
it?
sure.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah, let them know
So
how.
yeah, after you see a couple of credits, my credit and the cinematographer and the actors and the producers, it comes back to the two of them sitting in the cafe, and they're just sitting there silently. And Noah's sipping his coffee, and Madison says, "Are you going to write about this?" And he doesn't respond, and she says, "You're going to write about this, aren't you?" And then there's a little smile as he's raising his coffee to his lips, and we cut the black. So
Nice.
I debated a long time about whether or not to include that because I wasn't sure if it would undercut the drama of the final moment. But ultimately, I went for it. Um, I think my I think that what I decided from the way I ended it, and the reason I ended it the way I ended it. Sorry, I'm shaking my desk, so my thing is shaking. Was that they had finally reached a point where they were mature enough to realize they both had fault in what happened to them. And I think that Noah coming to her and saying, I'm not trying to prove anything. I know I've already lost you. I just want to say I'm sorry, was evidence to her that he had really grown up. And her, I don't think he needed evidence from her, but him saying that triggered her to realize, yeah, this wasn't all on you. And the fact that they could recognize that together gives me hope that they can go to a new phase in their relationship. At least that's the way I think about it.
That was kind of that was just my 2 cents. And I think oftentimes if you're able to give someone the space
Yeah.
to be heard, it opens up the kind of communication maybe you didn't have before. And I think that was a really beautiful example. That's at least how I read it.
Good.
So yeah, so that worked for me. So what is next for the film, and what is next for you?
Well, we hopefully play in a few more festivals. We're kind of nearing the end of the festival run. We're talking contract with a distributor right now, so that's looking. And once they take it, then they'll be looking at video on demand deals, and we don't know yet, but they have hopes for it. I mean, it'll get out there somehow. We just don't know the details yet. For me, I don't know. This pandemic has put me a little bit of in a creative rut, and I just haven't had an idea that I want to explore. And I don't know about you, but I'm just trying to keep my head above water. So
Yes, yeah, totally. I think that's very universal as well. I do know some people have the lockdown version, aspect
yeah,
of this has made them want to write more. Others, they need a break. They need a
yeah,
moment. So when
yeah.
inspiration does hit,
I've started some things, but I haven't. Nothing that's like gripped me enough to go for it. When I started writing this one, there was just something about it that you kind of know when and you just start writing it and you don't stop. And this one was like that. I got the idea and I had those 6 and then 7 sequences in my head pretty quickly, and then I began to build them, and the writing came along very fast. So I'm a streaky kind of writer. I wait for the thing that inspires me, and then I just go.
Well, I'm not concerned. I'm sure there are many more fabulous stories coming out of you. And of course, you keep us posted on that because
Thank you.
we want to see what's next. So thank you so much for being here, taking the time. And we love having your beautiful film in our program. And it's so great to see you. Thank you for spending this time with our audience.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that there are people watching it. Thank you for taking the time to watch the film and watch this Q&A. This is a blast for me, and I've had a great time.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much. And I do want to thank our audience for their support of Artists Naples and the Naples International Film Festival. All right, we'll see you next time.